And for more on the G20 summit, Stephen Nagy joins us live from Tokyo. He is a professor of politics and international studies at the International Christian University. Thanks for joining us this evening, Professor Nagy. Now, that shadow of uncertainty in the White House, it's not just in the U.S., is it? This is perhaps one of the first summits in a while that we're seeing leaders gathered at the table. Whatever they agree on, if they agree on anything, they might not be there in a few months to make sure these deals are pushed through.
That's right. There's a lot of uncertainty amongst the G20 leaders. The reality is this is not the election year of incumbents. We've seen this with Mr. Trump's election, but other governments as well, we've seen incumbent leaders leave. So really what's decided at the G20 will be somewhat tentative. Everybody's waiting for the changes in the White House in January. And what will the Trump 2.0 administration bring? No one really knows. But what we do know is that Mr. Trump will come in. He has a new agenda, an agenda that focuses on strength through peace through strength, on tariffs, and on really moving away from the Biden administration's systemic, sequential, and allies first approach to foreign policy in East Asia.
All right, what we do know, campaign slogans like securing peace through strength, looking at what promises were made in the campaign, what has been said by key figures around Mr. Trump, and of course, who he has appointed to key positions both in domestic and foreign policy. 2017, when Mr. Trump was in the White House, 2024 or 2025 rather, we are looking at a very different Mr. Trump, which are leaders in Asia, in East Asia. They need to be factoring that in, do they not?
Absolutely. We've seen the nomination of Mark Rubio, who is a China hawk, who is banned from visiting China, who has advocated for strong positions on Taiwan that go against the one China policy. This is going to be a game changer for U.S.-China relations. Bob Lighthouser, former United States trade representative, who's advocated for 60% tariffs on products made in China. This is going to fundamentally put more downward pressure on the Chinese economy, but also put pressure on all the economies that are dependent on the Chinese economy within Asia, whether it's Japan, South Korea, or the Southeast Asian countries. They have a complex and generally positive economic relationship with China, but at the same time, there's some challenges in those bilateral relations. So in terms of security and defense, in terms of diplomacy, in terms of trade, the leaders in East Asia are looking for how they can build bridges, but how they can prevent some of the challenges that are going to emerge from a tougher, I think, leaner and meaner Trump administration in the region.
And part of that, I suppose, Trump-proofing themselves against a leaner, meaner administration in the White House would be reaching out to each other and China as well. We've seen that, signing trade deals, the restarting of free trade talks between China, South Korea, and Japan after they have stalled for years. So despite these security challenges, they are finding their way around that, at least on trade.
It's true. So we should be clear that the region is very heterogeneous. There's lots of different relationships with Washington. I do think Tokyo will probably do much better with the Trump administration in terms of deepening the alliance and strengthening positions in the South China Sea and in the Sea of Japan. South Korea may have a more difficult time as it deals with the Trump administration, who's often demanded that South Korea put more on the table in terms of self-defense. In Southeast Asia, again, these countries don't want to choose between the United States and China, and their leaders consistently say that we want to have a strong partnership with China, at the same time, a strong partnership with the United States. With that, they're going to start to build bridges. They're going to invest in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Likely, they're going to expand the Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think they're going to find ways to cooperate on the environment, maybe piracy, illegal, unregulated, undocumented fishing. But at the same time, they're going to invest in minilateral relationships, such as the South Korean, Japan-U.S. relationship that you mentioned, to demonstrate that they're increasing the burden sharing that the United States is demanding. So it's a mixed bag of working with the United States, working with partners in East Asia, but also investing in deterrence and resilience in their own economies.
But this is also not sharing the burden. That was a repeating call, certainly Mr. Trump's first time in office. And he has since, in his campaign, the key voices around him have come out to stress they are not, in fact, against alliances, but they want reciprocity. So we have seen that between 2017 and now. Japan has increased its defense spending, increased its defense cooperation with the US and with Australia, with South Korea and other middle-sized powers. It's also been more prepared to export weapons. It's lifted the limit on weapons exports. So is the US this time around, certainly on the Japan case, let's leave aside South Korea for now, be convinced that Japan is doing its part to share the security burden?
My sense is yes. And we've seen the Japanese, through their diplomatic outreach, really invest in the United States and the think tanks and the political communities that will be providing ideas to the Trump administration. They've assigned or they've paid for what we call Japan chairs at the Hudson's Institute, Heritage Institute, and other conservative think tanks to basically put Japan's interests and tying Japan's interests to making America great again. And that has been an effective ploy that was used by the Abe administration before he was killed. And I think this is going to be the game plan for the Japanese moving forward. Other partners and countries within the region, whether it's Australia, South Korea, maybe even Singapore, are all going to look to this playbook to see how they can, again, help make America great again by contributing to the U.S. and its interests, but at the same time, not alienate that key trading partner, China. You can't divorce China. There's no decoupling away from China. You have to work with China.
Has South Korea been able to do that, or can it do that? Has it got the leverage to do that?
Well, the Yoon administration is not in a popular state right now. On my recent visit, most supporters of the administration, and of course the progressives, don't see his policies really surviving beyond his administration, which ends in about 2 years. And this will be a challenge. So how can he institutionalize some of the changes that he's put into his government, whether that's the trilateral relationship between the U.S., Japan, and South Korea, whether it is relocating some semiconductor manufacturing capabilities away from the Taiwan Straits, or even having an Indo-Pacific strategy that does mention Taiwan. How much of this will survive will really depend on who comes into power and if the Yoon administration is effective at working with the United States in the last 2 years to, again, try to institutionalize these gains, demonstrate South Korea's commitment to the U.S. ROK alliance, and that it is increasing its burden sharing within that partnership.
Our final question, Professor Nagy. One criticism of the Biden administration, it has, as it promised when Mr. Biden entered office, which was to work with allies and partners, and they have done that. But one accusation is they have failed to be equally strong on economic policy, especially in Asia, in this region where trade is strategy. Under Mr. Trump, do you see these relations being, I suppose, less securitized and moving more building on trade under Mr. Trump? Is there any likelihood of that? Final question.
Unfortunately, I see the Trump administration really investing in strengthening the industrial base in North America and really focusing on the United States. And that means renegotiating the NAFTA 2.0 agreement, probably extracting more trade agreements between the Japanese and other states at the bilateral level. And this is going to be a challenge to the region. How they can balance that, I think, again, the region's neighbors of China all believe that there's no future economic prosperity without a Chinese economy, and they're going to continue to try and engage with China, engage with the U.S., but also build resilience in their economies through diversification, and lastly, build some deterrence in terms of the complicated security challenges that face the region. But they're going to continue to engage because really that is the only game in town for countries in the region.
Thanks, Stephen Nagy from Tokyo, Professor of Politics and International Studies at the International Christian University.